you warned against therapy becoming a rite of passage for kids. What did you mean by that?
Yeah. When I opened a psychology practice in Sydney, I chose to specialise with children and families. And at that point, nearly 20 years ago, I was seeing, a few patients, and I called them patients back then, not clients, because they were clinically unwell. And I saw a range of things from very significant trauma backgrounds of abuse to high conflict family law separations that were affecting children to eating disorders. And when I opened up that practice, there was one other person in my area, and I'm talking, quite a radius of the southern suburbs where I am, south of Sydney. And there was one other psychologist at that point who was really specialised in under 18-year-olds and families. Nowadays, we're a dime a dozen. There are so many child psychology practices in my area, and they all have waiting lists. Now, I might sound as a business owner like I'm just cranky that there's competition, but I do genuinely stand back and think I'm living in a first world country in a wonderful city where we are seeing very middle class families, and these kids have every opportunity provided to them, whether that be, material nature, but certainly with parents who are committed. And yet there are hundreds and hundreds of children in my local area seeing psychologists weekly, and it's absurd. And my practice has certainly changed, and I'm trying to curate a practice that is against that. But certainly the referrals that we've seen in the last 10 years have very much changed in nature. And they've changed because the parents who come and see me have usually listened to podcasts, hate to say it, listened to podcasts, read books, been on mummy blogs, been on the Facebook local area groups, and they almost have too much information. I say that a lot. Parenting has become an industry, and they come with me equipped with all this information, and yet what they've done is they've lost the ability to innately parent. That connection of mammals of hundreds of thousands, millions of years, to say, well, what does your gut tell you should do when your child's upset or your child's defiant? And there's so much information in their heads that they don't know, because everyone has a different opinion. So part of what I do is try to get back to that gut instinct of parenting. But I think a lot of practices are simply book children in, and children are turning up to talk to a counsellor or a psychologist or a school counsellor about issues that I think a generation ago may have concerned them, and they may have chatted to their parents about, maybe, may have been brushed off as nothing, or they may have gone through a process of not feeling great about it and being able to then problem solve. The problem with seeing a psychologist too early or entering therapy is this reliance and dependence of needing to go and almost purge these worries to someone on a fortnightly basis. I think it undermines a parent's role. Well, I really try and say to parents, you're the best therapist for kids. If I don't need to meet your kid, I won't. If you need a bit of support and help in how to address this, sure. But I don't think that as a random stranger to your child, I should be the replacement of them coming to talk to me. And then, of course, I think if we're dealing with children in particular, there's a great imbalance in the power dynamics between an adult therapist and a child. A child comes along every fortnight and tells them how worried they are about a friendship problem or school or going to see their dad on the weekend. And that therapist holds a lot of power with a subtle nod or a suggestive questioning to reinforce problems. There also seems to be this great move of the last 10 years with children and adults of validation of feelings. And part of that, I suppose, is what we're doing. We're saying that feeling sad is okay. And it is okay. That's fine to validate your child's feelings or your own feelings, to say, I'm allowed to feel angry. I'm allowed to feel sad. But my experience is that it then just ends there. And you don't get the second half of the aspirational problem solving, or the, but this doesn't define me. I can still push on and function. I can still dig deep in resiliency. You simply get the reinforcing nods from a therapist to say, yes, you're very sad. This is a terrible situation. And you are allowed to wallow. There's a certain amount of wallowing that's okay, and then it needs to stop. And I worry that ongoing therapy is actually just contributing to this problem.
I liken it a little bit to sport because, one, it's really simple for me to do that, and so I'm riddled with analogies that I can go to, and it'll be this might land well for you because you have background in sports psychology, but I think of it as if you've got a young athlete and they've got an issue with a game or something they need to develop as a skill set in order to perform better on the field. You can give them that as a coach and you can teach them and you can guide them. But if you are the one that they are leaning on at all times in order to execute that skill in the performance, when you eventually are not there, they are actually useless. They're no longer autonomous in what they're doing and they're unable to perform. And I kind of feel like we're doing that in the early situation with therapy, that these kids are, I feel, going to grow up, again, identifying it, and we've spoken about that, identifying that I am an anxious person, I need therapy, I need to do this, rather than allowing them to have that experience themselves, figure it out, be autonomous, and then possibly have the guidance later on once they've developed something, rather than kind of needing to, I can't do this unless I've spoken to my therapist, I can't do this unless I've spoken. And again, I kind of even liken it to people that I meet who sort of are so rigid in their, I guess, meditation practice that it's like, I have to do it at 6:30 every morning. And it's like, okay, well, what happens if fire alarm goes off or a loved one calls you and needs you early on in the next morning and you need to do that? Are you going to turn them down and you're going to be a non-functioning human being? No, you can move it, you can address it. So it's kind of this development of themselves and the need to rely on someone else in order to function. If you enjoyed that clip with Claire, then YouTube has put together the best video that it thinks you will like from our podcast. All you got to do is click here.